Podcast collaborations, some legal must-knows for real success. So you've found the perfect collaboration or partner for your podcast, and things are flowing and ideas are flying. But what about what happens when the excitement fades and the legal stuff starts to really matter? Partnerships and collaborations are very powerful, but they can also be tricky. And today, we're digging into the essential legal must knows for podcast collaborations to make sure that you are protected, prepared, and positioned for success. So, why collaborate in the first place? Well, collaborations are a great way to grow your audience, to tap into new markets, to create even better content. Whether you're co hosting an episode with another podcaster, or bringing in a guest, or teaming up with a brand for a sponsorship, working with others can open lots of new doors. But partnerships don't just run on good vibes, they need some legal frameworks and protection as well. When money and creative control and intellectual property are on the table, things can get complicated fast. Without the right agreements in place, you're inviting confusion, disagreement, possibly even legal disputes. So let's talk today about the key legal considerations you need to know before you dive into that collaboration, whatever kind it is. So first things first is to figure out who owns what. One of the most common conflicts in podcast collaborations revolves around intellectual property, the IP. Now, you need to decide upfront who owns the content that you're creating together. Are you both going to share ownership jointly, or is one party or the other going to retain full control? Now, let's say you invite another podcaster onto your show, and together you decide to develop an amazing mini series of episodes or something like that. Do you both have the right to distribute it freely in your feeds and on your respective platforms? Or is the content going to stay limited to one or the other of the channels? Or is it an entirely new channel? Answering these questions before you start hitting record is really crucial. And here's a pro tip. Always specify the use of audio clips and transcripts and any other logos or branding. And don't forget, guest agreements are essential, even if your guest is a really close friend. Things change over time, and we don't want to have problems down the line. So it's best to get those guest releases signed by everybody who's coming on the show, period. All right, next up, let's talk about the money. If your collaboration involves a sponsorship, or there's ad revenue or subscription income, you have to have a clear plan for how the money's going to be divvied up. This is where things can get sticky if you don't hammer out those details in advance. It's always harder to negotiate things when there's real money in hand on the table and people are invested, so to speak. If you're going to split the ad revenue equally, great. Or is the person who's bringing the sponsor to the table going to get a bigger share? Are you agreeing to split expenses like equipment and promotion costs? Setting these expectations in the beginning really is how you prevent misunderstandings and protect your relationships later. Now, creative control and decision making is another one. Creative control, this can sneak up on you, but even the best collaborations hit bumps in the road when it comes to creative decisions. You need to decide who has the final say on things like the episode structure, the show format, the editing, and the release schedules. If one person is taking the lead, great. Or are decisions all made jointly? And what happens if there's a disagreement or an impasse? How do you resolve that? Will you have regular meetings to discuss ideas, or is it all going to be handled informally by email or text or whatever? Collaborating without clear boundaries can quickly turn into chaos. And you also have to think about terminations and exit strategies. It's not the most fun thing to talk about, but every collaboration has to have this exit plan. I mean, after all, what happens if one person decides they want to leave? Will the remaining partner be allowed to continue using the content? What about making the show, continuing to use the RSS feed, creating new content? Does the exiting partner, still get a share of any future revenue? Planning the exit strategy right from the start ensures that if things change, everybody knows what to expect. Having a written agreement like a podcast prenup is a great way to protect your project and your relationship. A podcast prenup is really any agreement that sets forth these relationship kinds of issues so you know what happens if the worst things happen. Speaking of which, I highly recommend that you check out my podcast prenup planning guide by going on over to podcastprenup.com. This is an essential tool for getting those details ironed out early. It's a set of talking points that you should open up and have a conversation about so you can start to get these things down on paper. Now, one other thing I want to mention is if somebody dies, again, having a podcast prenup in place so that if, God forbid, one of the partners dies, the other doesn't end up in business with the partner's spouse or children or something like that. So again, good to have a plan for what's going to happen. Maybe there's a buyout of the deceased partner's interest in the show, or maybe it's just okay, well, we're done, we'll go forward, you keep going, more power to you. It sort of depends whether there's money on the table, doesn't it? Right? All right. Well, anyway, some final thoughts. Collaborations are and can be an amazing way to grow your show and reach new audiences, but it really only works well when the parties are on the same page legally. So before diving into your next partnership, take some time to outline clear agreements about ownership and revenue, creative control, what happens if things go south. Trust me, your future self will thank you. And remember, if you need templates or legal tools to make your collaborations airtight, head on over to podcastlawforms.com. That's where you'll find everything you need to build solid partnerships and protect your intellectual property, keep things running smoothly, and know what to expect when things go a little off the rails. So thanks for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review if you found this material helpful. And until next time, I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, to help you cover your bases and build a legit podcast. This has been Legit Podcast Pro. I'll see you again next time. Thanks for being here.